You ever look at somebody and think, how in the world are they still standing after everything they've been through? That's India. That's Bharat. See, people have been sleeping on India for centuries. Thought she was soft. Thought she was just spiritual incense and elephants, Bollywood and yoga mats. But let me tell you something loud and clear today. India ain't weak. She ain't fragile. She's power wrapped in patience, thunder hidden behind silence, a lion that don't roar until it's time to strike. Now, let's go ahead and lay this out. You can't crush what's already been through the fire and came out gold. India has been invaded, looted, colonized, and divided, but she never broke. Empires came and went, swords flashed, flags changed, but that soul, Bharat's soul, remained unshaken. You got to understand, when your spirit is forged in struggle, your spine don't bend easy. That's why you can't crush Bharat. See, strength ain't always about who's loudest in the room or who's flexing the most on the world stage. Sometimes power is silent. Sometimes it's quiet preparation, discipline, and grit. India has been building while the world was busy doubting. It didn't make a scene. It didn't shout every little achievement from the rooftops. But now the world's starting to pay attention and some folks getting nervous. Let's talk about power. Not just military, though. We can go there too, but real power, economic strength, technological dominance, space missions, nuclear capability, global diplomacy, self-reliance. That's power with depth. That's not a one-punch knockout. That's endurance. That's resilience. You crush weak things. India ain't weak. It's got layers. Cultural, strategic, historical, economic, and every one of them built tough. Remember when they said India would never rise, said she was too poor, too divided, too backward? Well, guess what? The same country they doubted is now putting satellites into orbit on a budget smaller than a Hollywood movie. The same country they said would collapse under its diversity is managing to hold 1.4 billion voices in one democratic system. That ain't chaos. That's coordination on a level the world can't even fathom. You think India ain't strong because she's kind? Let me tell you something. Don't confuse calm with cowardice. Don't mix culture with weakness. India got the kind of strength that don't need to shout to prove itself. It's the strength that's been built over 10,000 years of civilization. That's longer than most of today's nations have even existed. That's ancient wisdom mixed with modern fire. You ever notice how when a storm comes, it's the shallow roots that get pulled out first? Big trees with deep roots, they bend, they sway, but they don't fall. That's India, deeply rooted in faith, in philosophy, in family, in identity. Bharat is like that banyan tree, and the deeper the roots, the harder it is to destroy. You can throw sanctions, propaganda, intimidation, but you ain't shaking that foundation. Now, I know some folks don't like India's rise. They uncomfortable seeing a brown-skinned ancient civilization standing shoulder to shoulder with superpowers. They try to paint narratives, try to stoke division, but here's the truth. They scared. Scared because India ain't looking to take over, but she refuses to be taken over again. Scared because India ain't playing games. She's walking with dignity, but her fists are bald. Ready if you test her. India's military. Let's go. There. One of the largest standing armies in the world, nuclear power, ballistic missiles, hypersonic development, indigenous fighter jets, navy that can control the Indian Ocean. And don't get it twisted. She's peaceful, but if war comes to her doorstep, she knows how to respond. You don't poke a tiger and not expect claws. And let's not forget the spirit of the people. That's where the real power lies. The everyday Indian, the farmer, the soldier, the scientist, the entrepreneur. They got hustle in their blood. They grind, they rise early, sleep late, and keep pushing. Whether they in the villages of Uttar Pradesh or the tech parks of Bangalore, they're driven by one thing: progress. Can't stop a people who believe in their own rise. And here's what makes Bharat truly indestructible. Her unity and diversity over 2000 ethnic groups, hundreds of languages, every religion on the planet has a home here. That could have been a recipe for disaster. But India said, no, we ain't going to let our differences divide us. We gone, let them define us. That's a different kind of strength, a mistake of chaos turned into a masterpiece of democracy. And then there's this rising fire inside her youth. India is one of the youngest countries on the planet. Over 65% of the population is under 35. That's not a statistic. That's a storm waiting to change the world. They're coding. They're creating. They're building billion-dollar companies from chai shops and college dorms. You can't crush a nation that's got one eye on its ancient texts and the other on artificial intelligence. India's got power because she remembers who she is. This is the land of the Mahabharata and Mars mission, the land of Buddha and Bites, the land that gave the world zero and now gives the world startup unicorns. From spiritual knowledge to scientific innovation, India ain't just catching up, she's leapfrogging. And that's terrifying to those who thought she'd stay at the bottom. You ever watch a quiet person in the gym? They ain't making noise, ain't flexing in the mirror, but every day they adding plates to the bar. Silent, steady, consistent. Then one day they lift something that makes everybody stop and stare. That's Bharat. For decades, she's been preparing, growing, and now she's stepping into her own. You might not have seen it coming, but now that it's here, you better recognize. Now I know some people want to break her Dut spirit, divide her from within, use caste, religion, language, politics. But Bharat's been through worse. Empires tried to erase her. Colonialists tried to rewrite her history. Still here, still standing. You can't destroy what's already faced extinction and still rose. See, real power don't always look like a sword. Sometimes it looks like a woman walking miles to cast her vote, like a child studying under a streetlight, like a doctor in a remote village saving lives. That's the real face of India's strength. It's in the will of her people. And let's talk about character, because that's what sustains power. You can build weapons and walls, but if your soul ain't right, it all falls apart. India has character. She don't invade. She don't occupy. She don't colonize. She defends. She uplifts. That moral clarity, that dharma, is what makes her unconquerable. You can't crush a nation that fights for truth and economically. Let me say this, India ain't the future. She's the now third largest economy in the world by purchasing power, fastest growing among the major economies. Manufacturing, IT, defense, agriculture, all of it booming, and the world is watching. Investors coming in, alliances shifting, tables turning. The West ain't the only center of power anymore. And that's because India decided to stop waiting for validation and start building her own legacy. And in case anybody forgot, India don't need to be anyone else. She don't need to copy the West. She ain't trying to be China. She's writing her own story in her own ink, because she knows when you walk in your own truth, you don't need anybody else's permission. This is the land where the Ganges flows and rockets fly, where prayers rise in temples and code gets written in coffee shops. Ain't a soft power. It's a soulful power, one that outlasts trends, outshines doubt, outworks everybody in the room. And that's why you can't crush Bharat. So let the critics talk. Let the haters throw shade. Let the skeptics scoff, because while they're busy doubting, Bharat is busy doing. She's building roads through mountains, sending missions to the moon, lifting millions out of poverty, breaking records in sport, in space, in science. You can't crush momentum built on millions of dreams moving in the same direction. And don't get it twisted. India don't just survive, she transforms. Every challenge becomes fuel. Every setback becomes a setup. Every scar becomes a symbol. She's not a victim. She's a warrior with grace. And in a world that often rewards loudness, and domination. Bharat reminds us that true power is rooted in humility, in balance, in purpose. That's why India's power is different. That's why it's permanent, because it ain't just about what's on the outside. It's about the unshakable spirit inside. You can't crush spirit like that. You can't defeat a dream like that. You can't silence a voice like that. Bharat doesn't bow anymore. She stands proud, fierce, ready. And for anyone out there still doubting, let me give it to you straight. India ain't waiting for the world to recognize her power. She already knows it. And once you know your worth, that's the moment nobody can break you. That's the moment no one can crush Bharat. You know what makes something truly uncrushable? It's not the size. It's not even the weapons. It's the spirit. It's the fire that don't go out, even when the winds of the world blow hard against it. And Bharat India, she got that spirit in her bones. It's that quiet, stubborn fire that refuses to die, no matter how many times they tried to stomp it out. You ever seen a nation carry the weight of centuries of pain and still smile with dignity? That's Bharat. And that's why no one can crush her. Because when your strength comes from deep inside, ain't no outside force strong enough to take you down. You gotta go way back to understand this kind of strength. See, Bharat ain't some new experiment. She ain't a fresh invention trying to find her identity. Nah, this land been walking the earth with purpose since the dawn of civilization. From the Indus Valley to the Vaz, from Ashoka to Chandragupta, from Bhagat Singh to Abdul Kalam, the spirit of Bharat has flowed like the Ganga, constant, sacred, and unstoppable. You can knock her down, but she don't stay down. She rises always. Her cultural roots, man, they run deeper than the oceans. Every grain of her soil holds history. Every temple, every fort, every song, every story, it all speaks of a nation that's seen everything, lost everything, and still held on to everything that mattered. You talk about culture, you talk about soul food, you talk about tradition. India is a walking encyclopedia of it, but don't mistake that for being stuck in the past. See, the magic of Bharat is that she carries the past on her back while sprinting toward the future. It's like watching a dancer perform classical steps on a digital tall stage. Tradition with transformation, roots with wings. That's Bharat. There's a reason why, in a world obsessed with trends, India keeps standing out. She don't chase what's temporary. She builds what lasts. You want to know how a country survives centuries of being looted, broken, betrayed, with values, with beliefs, with identity, and India's got that unlock. She's been through Mughal invasions, British colonization, partition, terrorism, political corruption, border tensions, economic struggles, you name it. But look at her now, not only standing, but soaring, not just healing, but thriving, not just participating in the global conversation, but leading it, that spirit of Bharat in the people. See it in the woman running a chai stall in the heat and still feeding a hungry child for free. You see it in the farmer who wakes up before the sun to sow seeds he may not even live to harvest. You see it in the soldier at the border who smiles in the face of death. You see it in the child studying under a streetlight with dreams bigger than his village. That ain't just hustle. That's heritage. That's something passed down through generations. That's power born from perseverance. And let's talk about confidence. Oh, it's rising. It ain't cocky. It ain't loud, but it's undeniable. You can see it in how Indians walk today. Chin a little higher, eyes a little sharper. That old colonial shadow, it's fading. That inferiority complex. They tried to instill cracking apart because India ain't just producing engineers and doctors anymore. She's producing leaders, creators, innovators, visionaries. She ain't just working behind the scenes. She's stepping into the spotlight and not asking for permission anymore. You look at how India handled COVID-19. Look at how she manufactures vaccines, not just for herself, but for dozens of countries. That ain't just capacity. That's compassion. That's global responsibility. And that's the kind of leadership rooted in Dharma, in doing what's right, not just what's profitable. India doesn't crush others to rise. She lifts others as she climbs. That's what makes her different. That's what makes her powerful, and that's what makes her uncrushable. When a nation's strength is tied to its culture, when it draws power from its spiritual core, it becomes a force you can't measure with just numbers and GDP charts. You gotta feel it. You gotta walk through her streets, hear her prayers in the early morning hours, taste her food made with hands that carry generations of stories, see her festivals light up the night sky with colors no camera can fully capture. That soul, that spirit. That's the unbreakable thread that ties her past to her future. And the thing is, Bharat don't just survive pain. She transforms it. Every wound becomes a lesson. Every betrayal, need becomes wisdom. Every tragedy becomes poetry. India doesn't just heal. She teaches the world how to heal. You see it in her music, her cinema, her literature. You see it in how even the poorest family will share their last piece of bread with a stranger. That's a strength the world doesn't always understand, but it's real, it's loud in its silence, it's powerful in its patience. Her confidence today isn't born from arrogance. It's born from rediscovery. For too long, the world told her who she was. For too long, she believed the lies. But now she's remembering the power of her ancestors, the science of her sages, the strategies of her warriors, the sacrifices of her freedom fighters. And once you remember who you truly are, you walk different, you talk different, you stop begging for a seat at the table and start building your own. The modern Indian walks with the legacy of ancient empires and the urgency of today's innovation. Bharat is coding the future while preserving the scriptures. She's building the next space mission while singing lullabies that have been sung for centuries. And that duality, that balance, that's where the uncrushable power lies. She ain't one-dimensional. She ain't predictable. She's the ultimate blend of past and progress, silence and strength, fire and forgiveness. Now let's talk about faith, because faith is a big part of Bharat's strength. Not just religious faith, but faith in life itself, in justice, in karma, in the belief that truth eventually wins. Sign of Juve alone triumphs. That's not just a motto. That's a belief etched into the Indian soul, and that faith, it's kept her going through every storm. Empires fell, colonizers left, but Bharat kept walking, kept believing, kept rising, and she still but does. You want to see what real power looks like? Watch how India uplifts herself without destroying others, how she opens her arms to refugees, how she respects other cultures while proudly wearing her own identity. That's strength. That's power with character. And when you got character, when your strength comes from love and not fear, you become untouchable. You become unshakable. Every Indian child born today is not just carrying a name, they're carrying legacy. They're carrying the dreams of freedom fighters, the blessings of sages, the prayers of mothers, and they're doing it with swag, with skill, with purpose. They're not ashamed of their accent. They're not hiding their brown skin. They're saying, this is who I am and I'm proud of it. That right there, that confidence, that's why Bharat can't be crushed. And let's not forget, India's rise ain't dependent on anyone's approval. She's done waiting for validation. She's moved on from trying to prove herself to the world. Now she's focused on proving herself to herself. And when that happens, when a nation starts believing in its own strength, that's the moment you better step back and watch. Because that's when the uncrushable truly awakens. India doesn't need to shout. She lets her actions speak. She lets her achievements speak. From Chandrian to startups in Hyderabad, from defense corridors in Tamil Nadu to green energy in Gujarat, India is moving fast but steady, loud enough to be noticed, humble enough to be respected, and fierce enough to be feared if crossed. And when you understand the kind of fire that burns in a billion hearts, hearts that have been told for too long that they weren't enough, you realize that this ain't just a country. It's a movement, a wave, a revolution in slow motion, and it's gathering speed. You can't crush that kind of momentum. You can't stop a train that's been waiting at the station for centuries, finally hearing the whistle blow. Bharat is uncrushable because she chooses hope over hate, because she builds more than she breaks, that prays before she punishes, because she forgives but never forgets, because she knows the cost of freedom and the weight of history, and because she refuses to let that history define her future. She writes her own script in her own language, with her own ink on her own terms, and that kind of power, that kind of rooted, rising, radiant power that don't break, that don't bend, that don't fade, that stays,